Hello everyone. So this video is about rent laws, and you'll see where this took place. And so dozens were arrested at the state capitol as a debate begins to escalate. And this has been a long, drawn out debate. So this is straight out of the New York Times. People have had enough. And I just spoke with someone earlier today at work, and she was telling me she has a relative that lives in New York. And for a one bedroom, they're charging $1,800 a month. And it's not even that big. It doesn't have that many amenities that come with it at all. So activists from across the state formed a barricade in front of the doors at the Capitol, demanding universal rent control legislation. And before long, you won't see only this happening in New York, you'll be seeing it in Los Angeles as well. So, Albany, the conflict over the New York City's rent laws turned a ruckus on Tuesday as hundreds of tenants and activists flooded the state capitol, leading to scuffles and dozens of arrests. So, this is by Vivian Wang and Luis Fiere Sandurini. So, what happens with all of this? For months, activists have cast a looming rewrite of the New York's rent laws as a once in a generation battle. So, the state law that regulates almost 1 million rent stabilized apartments expires June 15th. And that's like right around the corner, pretty much. June 15 will be here before you know it. So, with Democrats in control of the legislature, for only the third time in more than a half a century, progressive lawmakers are pushing for tenant friendly provisions. Now, with 11 days remaining, the fight has increased in intensity as one bedroom rents in the city have hit an all time high at a time when New York has the largest homeless population in the country. And so here's the protesters here. And so New York communities, they want change and they want it now. So this is becoming an ongoing problem. And so I did a previous video talking about homelessness in Los Angeles. And I also extended it to say that there were also issues with homelessness in San Francisco, in um, other parts of California, and in New York. Most metropolitan or city areas or urban cities have had issues that are growing now with homelessness. And so why are we here today? We are here today to find homelessness. We are tired of being nice. Are we tired of being nice? Yeah! Being in the office, asking, talking, setting up meetings. We are here as a man. Yeah. Demand our right, demand that we are taken seriously. Yeah. I spoke on the word over a week ago because there was no homeless crisis in Long Island. I call that BS. You know why? Why? Because the homelessness has increased on a daily basis. Families are being separated out of their homes on a daily. Children are being affected on a daily basis. I find it absurd that out here it's a crime to be homeless, but it's not a crime to eliminate these landlords who take advantage of the tenants. Yeah. I am here today. I'm going to get arrested. I'm going to be one of the folks who's going to get arrested. And I'm proud. Yeah. This is about us and our children, our families, our community. Right. You don't work. We don't work for you. You
So there you have it. And that is just one of many people who are disgruntled and they want answers and they want solutions. And we've been asking what is going to happen with rent stabilization. So this was Peggy Perkins, New York NYCC member. We are not here to ask, we are here to demand the Senate and the State Assembly to pass A119 bills for our families and communities. So you work for us. If you don't do this or it, we'll vote you out. And so hashtag universal rent control, hashtag tenant Tuesday. So the activists dressed in matching red t-shirts crowded onto stairs, jammed hallways, and blocked the entrances to the governor's office and legislative chambers. And so some banged on the glass doors of the governor, Andrew M. Cuomo's office, while state troopers stood guard. Others linked arms and refused to allow lobbyists and staff members through the Senate and Assembly chambers. All nine bills, they shouted their chants, all nine bills reverberating through the building. And so this is another video so you can actually see what took place during the protest. So it is spread. Homelessness is not only happening in Los Angeles, it is happening in New York, it is happening also in Atlanta. I've been hearing that there's problems with living in certain areas because they're raising rents. Gentrification has been happening in a lot of these cities where people have grown up, their families have grown up, they've lived all their lives, and they're being priced out. So they were referring to the nine renters friendly bills, collectively known as universal rent control. So that have been vigorously pushed for by a statewide coalition for months. So this is something that is so huge, which is why you're seeing so many people here and so militant about this, of course, said Jeannie Dubanoff, 80 years old, a member of the Riverside Edgecombe Neighborhood Association in Washington Heights. And so there were several commotions. At one point, a group of men trying to enter the Senate chambers reached over the shoulders of a group of activists who were blocking the entrance and trying to pull the doors open as activists strained to keep them shut. So near the assembly, state troopers, activists pushed each other as the troopers tried to advance through the crowd. And you're going to be able to see some of that. So in all, 61 people were arrested and charged with disorderly conduct. Among them was Jumane Williams, the New York City public advocate and a former tenant organizer as well. So underneath this video, it says housing for all, housing justice for all. And so Jumane Williams was being arrested at the door at the New York governor's office. So you'll see this. I'm going to continue reading and then I'll go back up. But two of the people arrested were also charged with third-degree assault for striking the assembly sergeant at the arms, according to the spokesman for the state troopers. So the leader of the assembly have said they support 8 of the bills. The Senate leadership had stayed mostly mum until Tuesday when they issued a statement almost immediately after the protest wound down. And so here we go up here. So, following the long discussion within the Senate Majority Conference, it is clear that we have support for all 9 priority housing bills. So, Andrea Stewart's cousins, the majority leader of the Senate, said, "We must use the time to work with our partners to pass the strongest housing protections in the state history." And so, the real deal, in other words. So here's Assembly Sergeant Arms Wayne Jackson climbing over, being lifted over protesters at the Capitol today. So we deleted the prior tweet because he was misidentified as an assembly member. And so you'll get to see that. But activists said that they remain concerned that the bills would be watered down. They have been especially critical of Mr. Cuomo, who has received millions of dollars in political contributions from the real estate industry, and recently said that he did not support some of the proposed measures. So protesters lining the Capitol Central staircase tossed down fake $100 bills printed with the faces of Mr. Cuomo and several prominent real estate industry lenders or leaders. I said lenders. So Mr. Cuomo has spent the past few days attacking the Senate, accusing it of touting progressive rhetoric but not delivering. On Tuesday, soon after Ms. Stewart's cousins released her statement, the governor's office fired back. So you know a legislative body has the votes for a piece of legislation when they pass the bill. Rich Azzopardi, a senior advisor to Mr. Cuomo, said, "So if the Senate has the votes, they should pass the bills today." And so I'm going to go back up here. And so this guy right here, Assembly Sergeant at Arms Wayne Jackson. So you get to see him. He's climbing and being lifted over protesters. So you see that this whole thing has gotten really heated up. So they repeated the call on Tuesday, singling out the legislative leaders. Okay. And so I'm just letting you see. Okay, okay, so they repeated that call on Tuesday, singling singling out the legislative leaders in a marked escalation from the previous rhetoric. So, in addition to signs denouncing Mr. Cuomo, the protesters also carried signs challenging Mr. Heasties and Miss Stewart cousins to choose between landlords and families. And so this is an issue even in Los Angeles. A lot of this has been like developers who have come in neighborhoods and they've wanted to build condos or high rise luxury apartments. And luxury, with that word luxury on it, means it's going to be pretty pricey and it's unaffordable. And some will even go so far to say that they'll have a few units in their building that are affordable, but it ends up not being affordable, even though those might be the lower end or maybe the least expensive units in the building. They still are unaffordable because if they were, you wouldn't see as much homelessness, and there's not as many of those places to go around that are affordable. So in addition to the signs denouncing Mr. Cuomo, the protesters also carried signs challenging Mr. Hasties and Ms. Stewart Cousins to choose between landlords and families. So advocates support eliminating two provisions that allow landlords to raise rents when they make building wide improvements or renovate apartments, arguing that these tactics are routinely used to jack up rents, push out tenants, and deregulate units. And so that is what has happened. The same thing happening in New York has happened all over Los Angeles. It has happened or is happening in well, Inglewood primarily has been hit with that specifically because they're building stadiums, and that's sort of like their alibi for developers to build their luxury apartments and condos and high rises that are completely unaffordable for people's living. So Juame Williams, or Juwane Williams, the New York City public advocate and former tenant organizer, was one of the 61 people who was arrested on Tuesday. But Mr. Cuomo, as well as Mayor Bill de Blasio, have cautioned that abolishing those provisions would deter building owners from investing in buildings, echoing similar arguments that have been made by the real estate lobby. Both have said that they support tweaking the provisions instead. So, despite the uncertain fate over some of the proposals, lawmakers are poised to pass many of the advocates previously thought unimaginable when the Senate was controlled by Republicans who have traditionally allied themselves with the real estate lobby. So when the rent regulations last expired in 2015, Republicans resisted the elimination of the so-called vacancy decontrol, which still allows for the deregulation of an apartment when it becomes vacant and its rent passes a certain threshold. So critics have called for its elimination because it has led to the deregulation of more than 155,000 units since 1994. And so the time there's almost unanimously an agreement, even within the real estate industry, that the notorious provision will be scrapped. Okay, and so says housing justice for all. So this went down to the governor's office and took the New York Governor Cuomo and took back what he stole from me. Okay, so this is somebody's statement, and I believe that might be somebody speaking. And so I'm going to read the rest of it and then I'll go back up to the video. But several hours after the protest first arrived, and the protesters, most of them cleared out, but a group of about a dozen remained seated outside the governor's office chanting, are chatting quietly and raising their voices to chant when people passed by as well. So at one point, some troopers appeared on the stairwell above. Will you arrest us already? One protester called out because I guess they were probably watching them to see if there was going to be any more commotion. So this is the last video of part of this article. So people are really, really militant about protesting about rent issues in many cities. So this is something that really is going on. And so I thought this was pretty much just backing up some of the things that I've been saying about some of the homelessness and things that have been going on in a lot of these cities. It's been a huge problem and it's gotten out of control. And so that is true. It's not something that's fake. And so for those, because there's a lot of people who doubt some of the videos are real until they actually are going through some of the circumstances themselves or they know of someone. But these are cities that are having a lot of trouble with housing people that are families, just working class people who just don't make as much money. The rent they're asking for some of these units is just too expensive. And that has been a growing problem, and it's scary because it's not only happening in one area. As some people thought it was happening just in their neighborhood. Like Inglewood residents in California thought probably maybe it was because the stadiums were being built, and we're the only ones affected by this. But unfortunately, no, there are other cities that they're having these high-rise apartments, or they're having renovations, or they're trying to move people out of places so that they can raise rents and basically price people out of neighborhoods they've always been in. Some people have been in these neighborhoods for a decade or longer, and they have jobs. They've been pretty much stable in their communities, and you're pretty much what they've been doing is when they've been raising the rents, it's forcing people to have to make drastic decisions to move with relatives or take smaller units that still are maybe too expensive, and you can't move everyone in, so it separates families. It's disrupting a lot of people who have been in the community, and they're working class people. These are not people that are criminals. These are not people who are trying to do any harm. They are just trying to live. And so this is the unfortunate reality that we're having in a lot of these cities. And some people have even taken to sleeping in their cars, their vehicles, and the vehicle has become their place to stay. So I've been seeing a lot of that, other than RVs and motels and hotels where people have been frequenting to not be just abandoned or left on the street. If there's no shelters, then some people will end up sleeping out of vans or cars. And so, what are your thoughts on this issue? It's really starting to get really scary because just regular people that you've known, that you always knew, that you thought things were going to be okay, and next thing you know, they have to abruptly move and they have to switch gears because financially they're not able to afford just regular apartments that they've been in for a long time, unless there have been some people that I've heard, people I've known that I've heard that have stayed in their apartments for many years and they're afraid to move because they know about the rent regulation issues, and that things aren't as stable as they used to be. Used to could move to a bigger place and you didn't fear that rent was going to be too expensive and you'd make adjustments. but not to the magnitude to where now you can't even pay your bills, you can't buy groceries, you can't even go anywhere to spend, a family day with your relatives and loved ones because you have to worry about rent and if it's going to increase. And so the other thing I wanted to add is that some of these units that they have been raising the rents for, they're in neighborhoods that aren't that great. And I wanted to add things that I know that I've experienced because I live in the LA area. And I'm not afraid to say that. Um, I see a lot of homelessness, and I've seen some apartment buildings that, it's got trash, litter everywhere. Some of the people are not, people that you would, if you had a choice, you probably wouldn't live in some of those neighborhoods because of what environment is around. There are people who are involved in criminal activity, or they're involved in drug dealing, or they're just maybe rude tenants. People that you wouldn't want to, if you had a pick, you wouldn't choose those buildings to stay in, but they want higher rents from those same buildings. They want you to pay luxury apartment money, but you're not having to live in luxury living. Maybe the inside of your apartment when you first move in might have been, renovated. It might be revamped, but they don't screen their tenants. So you don't know who you're living next to and what you're going to encounter. You might encounter people who are rude and who don't respect the other tenants' rights as they live there as a tenant as well. You might encounter, activities that you would normally um, want to get yourself around or involved in. And they just kind of, when they fix these places up, maybe they put some new fixtures in and they call them luxury or remodeled apartments. They want this big money. And once they get you in there, there's no rent control. And then if they do charge the highest amount of rent, it's like, what are you really getting? You're not getting, like there are some buildings, they want a lot of money. They want more than sometimes 1900 a month, but there's no laundry on site. There's no gym. There might be a parking stall, but you're squeezed in with people who are dinging your cars. And, you know, they have no supervision of children. Children are running amok outside. There's a lot of buildings I've seen like that, and they want all this money for these units, and they shouldn't even be asking for that kind of money for these apartments in some of the neighborhoods that I've witnessed. And just like if you use downtown as an example, downtown it's still riddled with homelessness and despair. They're building all these luxury apartments. They have underground, well, they're not apartments, but they're condos, or they're like luxury, like lofts. And they're really nice buildings. Everything is new. There's underground parking, there's security, but once you go out of your building, and you go to a restaurant, there's still those homeless people. Some of them are mentally ill. You'll find a lot more of the mentally ill in the downtown area and then in Hollywood as well. Um, like sometimes I've seen people in the early hours of the morning in Hollywood where they're walking the street and they need some type of, they need to be in like maybe a hospital or somewhere where they can be away from people because they have tendency to be violent. And so I don't know if you all remember there was a news segment where a guy, he was downtown, he was walking and he was not really bothering anybody, and somebody from out of nowhere, a homeless guy, pushed him into the street and a truck nearly crushed the guy. I think it punctured his lung or his lung collapsed. something or other like that. But it's very dangerous. Even if you're living downtown in a nice loft or you're living in a nice condo, you still at some point are going to want to come outside of your building. And I do see people walking their pets. And so you don't know who you're going to encounter because there's so many different people that frequent downtown. And so it doesn't, building these lofts and these high rise units is not going to put a mask or hide the fact that homelessness is rampant in that particular area. So at some point, people are going to come in contact with people who are on the street. And if they happen to have an encounter like the one guy I was explaining to you, where he was just walking, minding his own business, and this guy pushed him in the street from out of nowhere, and it turns out this guy was a homeless guy that did it. There's chances of those type of incidences happening. I even read where this guy said he lived downtown and he was tired of having to deal with, when he comes out of his building, he sees drug deals going on. And so there's apparently, I guess, a huge problem with drug dealing in the downtown area. And so it doesn't really make a difference if you say it's a luxury loft or it's a condo. If it's in neighborhoods or areas that have a lot of crime or they have problematic situations that are right around it, it's not going to hide the fact that that stuff is going on. It's at some point you're going to have to face it, the reality of this. And so, brings me to this, is why would developers want to even take a risk at building properties on those places in areas like that, knowing that people are eventually going to get tired and they're going to want to move. And you're going to have a bunch of empty units. So, unless the only way people would probably remain there, which is still risky, is they lower the price of the rents in the units, or if they're leasing, because I know there's a big thing out here where people will move in condos and lease the condos instead of buy them. And so once again, you're still in those situations that are probably problematic neighborhoods. And so I've been seeing that because a lot of these developers, they want to go to areas and neighborhoods where a lot of these people are still here. They haven't moved out, even though they might be priced out of an apartment or a unit. That doesn't mean they're going to move out of the neighborhood because they might have friends and family that stay. And so it doesn't completely mean people are going to move. So some people will even go so far as to stay in their area if they have to live in their car. And so you're going to have all that riffraff, and you're going to also have retaliation of people, like as you see in these videos, who are tired of it, and they're tired of paying high rent and having to deal with possibly ending up homeless. And so, what are your thoughts and feedback on this? Another thing is, earlier I spoke with a woman who said that she lived in a building, and she said that her landlord did not want to move in people that were from other countries, and primarily Hispanic. And so this seemed really discriminatory the way it sounded. But the thing that he was saying to her, and she's also from that group, but she pays her rent on time and she works and everything. And so she says that her landlord was really strict, and that he descriptively, this is what he was saying, is that he wasn't going to move in any more Latinos. And that's how she put it, because he had a guy that moved in and he paid his rent, but how he was paying his rent, he moved in this apartment and then he sectioned off some of the rooms in the place and sublet. And sublet is when you move in an apartment and then you rent out your rooms to get extra rent money from these people that you let move in there. And he would make like a little barricade, like a little, where you make your own space. You got your room, and then you got your room. And he was like his own little landlord in his own apartment. And so he sectioned it off and rented out rooms. And it wasn't Airbnb. It was more like he was just trying to collect extra money. So he was not only able to just pay his rent, but he was able to splurge because he had extra money. He was charging these people to stay in these rooms. And so when the actual landlord had found out, he was not happy about it. And so he said that he felt that they were running a game, and that he says he had that problem from most people who come from these other countries. And so, what in my mind I was thinking it might be, the real thing behind it is that it might have been people who were undocumented, and that he was collecting a little bit of money from these people, but that little bit of money added up and it made his pockets fat. This guy who was living in this apartment. And so when the real landlord found out about all this, he was not happy about it because he lied on his contract about who was living there. So he made it look like it was just going to be him, but he was renting out his rooms and he had other people living that weren't on his lease. And so I found this not to just be one group of people doing this. There's a lot of people that are now, the way things are going, a lot of people are considering this because the rents are too high. And so it's just this unfortunate situation. But what do you think about this? Because it doesn't look like it's going to get any better. I know personally, I've seen, like, I've had to walk over or step over, or around tents, as I'm going to work, or if I get on a freeway, I see people living under the freeway. This is what I've seen here in Los Angeles. I've seen people who are families and they're living out of a motel or a hotel, or they have to live with relatives because they can't afford their rents. And I've heard stories of people who said that they had an apartment and they were working, they didn't make that much money, but they had to move and they were forced to sleep in their car for a time, and then they ended up having to live out of hotels and motels. I hear people say they work more than one job, but it's still not enough to pay the rent. And so these are real issues, real families, real people who have real concerns. And so this is happening, affecting everybody. It's not happening to just one group of people. Do you see all these different people that are here? There's people who are white, there's people who are black, people who are Latino, there's people who are old, young, people who are families, people who are single. And so this is affecting a lot of people. And if they don't have the money, or they don't make six figures or more, or they're not working for some corporate, you know, company or business, and they're not particularly a homeowner as of yet, then they cannot afford some of these pricey lofts and condos and high rise luxury apartment living setups. So what do you think about this? This does not look good. To see that it's spreading, homelessness is spreading. It's spreading from out of Los Angeles and California to other states. And so, what are your thoughts and feedback on this? Because this is a growing issue. It's not an issue that is something to be ignored. And so, I'm really in support of the protesters and trying to step out and speak out on these issues, because there need to be protests that go on in Los Angeles about rent control, because it has gotten really out of control. Like, comment, subscribe, and thank you for listening.